Church burnings, a phrase that should strike at the heart of anyone who values the freedom of faith and sanctity of worship. And yet, in Canada, a country that claims to champion human rights and diversity, well, we've witnessed an appalling rise in these crimes since 2016, about a year after Justin Trudeau took office. Thanks to an order paper question from Conservative MP Jamil Javani, we now have the cold, hard numbers from Statistics Canada. These are the government's own numbers, and they are shocking. Between 2016 and 2023, there have been 463 reported cases of church arson or related burnings. Let me break it down for you. In 2016, 35 churches burned. By 2021, the number spiked to 90 churches in a single year, a 300% increase, coinciding with an explosion of anti-church rhetoric in the media, in the government, and elsewhere. Even in 2023, 74 more Canadian churches were targeted. To be clear, these numbers are specifically arsons. These aren't the thousands more acts of vandalism we know occur at Christian places of worship. Province by province, the prairies, British Columbia, and Quebec were the hotspots. In the worst years, over 30 churches were attacked in these regions alone. You'd think this would spark urgent national action, but instead, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau poured gasoline on the fire, figuratively speaking. In 2021, Trudeau publicly stated that he understood why churches were being burned. Understood why? What kind of leader looks at the deliberate destruction of places of worship and expresses understanding instead of horror and condemnation?
One of my reflections is I understand the anger that's out there against the federal government, against institutions like the Catholic Church. It is real, and it is fully understandable given the shameful history that we're all becoming more and more aware of and engaging ourselves to do better as Canadians.
Trudeau's comments, of course, came as so-called mass graves were alleged to have been discovered at residential school sites. But here's the truth. There were no confirmed mass graves, no evidence of mass burials, no excavations. The claims were based on ground-penetrating radar anomalies and media sensationalism. And yet, the narrative spread like wildfire, a lie that fueled real hatred and destruction. Churches, particularly those serving Indigenous and rural communities, were torched in acts of hate, justified by false claims and stoked by leaders who refused to speak the truth. Even when the evidence didn't back the hysteria, the damage was already done. Now the government points to its newly minted Canada Community Security Program announced in September 2024, 8 years after the crisis began. They're finally offering funding for locks, cameras, and temporary security guards. But let's be clear, this is too little, far too late. Since 2016, only $2.5 million has been handed out to 92 churches under its predecessor program. $2.5 million. It's like the amount to rebuild 2 large churches. That's a rounding error in Ottawa, and it's a pitiful response when you consider the scale of this crisis. So where was the urgency back in 2021 when 90 churches were burned in a single year? Why did Trudeau choose to understand the arson instead of condemning it? Why did this government sit on its hands while these sacred places were reduced to ash? Let's be honest. If this were happening to any other religious group, the outrage would have been deafening. The media would have demanded accountability. Politicians would have mobilized immediately. But when it's Christian churches, symbols of Canada's deep Judeo-Christian roots, it's met with a shrug and a pittance. This isn't just arson, it's hatred. It's a direct attack on faith, community, and truth itself. It's time for Canadians to demand more than platitudes and press releases from their so-called leaders. Justin Trudeau may understand why churches are burning, but real Canadians don't. We condemn it, and we demand that it stop. For Rebel News, I'm Sheila Gunn-Reid. The tacit approval of Justin Trudeau to hundreds of church burnings in this country speaks to a greater cultural problem. And it's a problem at Rebel News we vow to fight. Now, one of the best ways to help us fight, well, it gets you a little something in return. You buy a Rebel News Plus subscription. It's only $8 a month. It helps fill up our war chest. And then you get access to premium shows and exclusive content you won't see anywhere else. Just go to rebelnewsplus.com to help us keep fighting in 2025.